All right, so this is actually pretty interesting because, funny enough, I actually just did a video on this topic literally just yesterday. Now, the interesting part about this also is that there seem to be two recurring themes with Joe Rogan. One of them being that he seems to keep talking about the superiority of having presidential candidates on podcast format, like in the Joe Rogan format, than it is having them on these different shows or these different debate formats and basically functioning in little audio snippets, which, I agree with. He seems to keep talking about it, though. This clip that we're going to be looking at here is from 2 days ago, and he also seems to keep talking about how he keeps proclaiming that he himself is a leftist and that, he's with those kind of ideas. So, he's talking about Bernie Sanders here, and he made some interesting comments here, okay? And we are going to hear them out, and we'll talk about them.
With long form podcasts, you find out who everybody is.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good point.
Like Bernie Sanders. Like I had Bernie Sanders on.
Yeah,
There's a lot of people that like the fucking comments were insanely positive. They're like, I thought that guy was crazy. Like I thought he was a nut. I would see him in these little interviews. I'm like, he just wants to give away everybody's money. Like there was a picture with Bernie with my dog, and one of the fucking hilarious comments like, he just wants to give your dog treats to other dogs. But it's like that's the caricature. I mean, everyone has a caricature, right? The caricature of that guy is he just wants to take money from successful people and give it to lazy people. That's the worst view of Bernie Sanders, And you get to see, instead of like this narrative that gets established through these little short sound bites on these panel talk shows with three people talking over each other or debates or whatever it is, all those are ineffective. And what's interesting about it is all those are fueling podcasts. All those things that have for so long been thought of as mainstream venues for getting your ideas out. Now they highlight all the problems with those, and they highlight all the strengths of podcasts.
That's encouraging.
Yeah, it's very encouraging. And
are you a Bernie Sanders man?
He's a nice guy. I like some of his ideas. I do not have a problem with giving up more of my money as a person who's made a lot of money if I know that it's going to benefit the greater good of mankind in a real way.
You just don't want to see it squandered.
I don't want to see it squandered. I don't like bureaucracy. I don't like red tape. I don't like government. I don't like people that are so lazy that they just want to take everybody's money and then do what they will with it and take long lunch breaks. And this is the problem with like a lot of what we think of in terms of like government. Government is filled, it's bloated. It's filled with people that just got government jobs and they're not good at it. No one else wants that job, so they take that job, squander resources. That's what drives people crazy, and especially hardworking people that know how hard it is to make a living. You have to give, if you're a logger, you're going to give away a certain percentage of your money, and you're tired all day. You get splinters in your hands, and you're exhausted. And someone is going to take away your money and, allocate a certain amount of it to nonsense.
Yeah.
Okay, so there are quite a few things going on there. So first he says, first I want you to note his response to the question from the guest that he has on his podcast. The question being, are you a Bernie Sanders guy? Or I don't know if he said Bernie Sanders man or Bernie Sanders guy or whatever he said. But, if he's really a progressive, he'd just say, like, yeah, I support him. And I think last time he talked about it, he said, yeah, I support Bernie. Previous to that, he was a supporter of Tulsi Gabbard. So, I don't know. He's really all over the place and sort of weird. Also note that I done a video some months ago where I covered a clip of his where he's like, oh yeah, he said like I lost my trust or changed my opinion on Bernie Sanders because there's a video of him faking a phone call in front of some reporter, which was hilarious. Now he's a nice guy. It's a lot of flip-flopping that's going on. So, to be clear about his comments, he did state there that indeed he would be okay with raising his taxes if it were to mean that, it would go to the greater good. He's fine with sort of paying more money in taxation if it is to result in good things. And then he goes on to talk about bureaucracy and red tape and different things like that. And I get that, and the bloatation in certain areas, of course, is legit, especially when we're talking about the foreign policy sector. There's a lot of bloatation there. And, there are certain, aspects of bureaucracy, I guess, certain areas where I think it can certainly be bad. But, I think these are mostly what I would call right-wing talking points. They don't seem to be any sort of really all that serious critiques, and they also just seem to be kind of mindless talking points as well. And also, when he mentions, like, the logger, the logger's not really going to be paying much more in taxes, let alone he's going to be getting so much more from the government in terms of, you pay some money in, you get a lot of stuff out. So, it's just ridiculous there. I think that actually, we'll get into the clip in a second, but we're going to look back at a clip where he's talking about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's plan to tax people who make, if you make over $10 million in a year, okay, whatever money is made after that is taxed at 70%. That's how a marginal rate is. So let's say you made $11 million, right, in 1 year. One fiscal year, you made $11 million. Only $1 million of that is taxed at 70%. The rest of it's all taxed at the highest bracket, which is like 38, I think, or 40 something. Except right now it's 38, but it might be somewhere in the low 40s under a Bernie Sanders plan. I actually don't remember what his top nominal regular rate would be. But let's kind of see what he said.
You got to start from a place. Put it like this. I don't know if you heard of this Green Deal where they want to take 70% of anyone that makes over $10 million, 70% of their income. It's the dumbest thing ever.
That's AOC, right? Is that her idea?
It's the dumbest thing ever, right?
I don't mean, I wasn't calling her. I like her.
But what I'm saying is my friend was like, oh, if the Democrats win, that's going to get passed because we hate rich people. And I go, that's the problem. We're starting at hate. The reason why you think it's going to pass is because you think people hate rich people. See, and that's the thing. You got to have a conversation.
That's not going to fix it. Here's the thing. First of all, you've got incompetent use of funds.
Where does the money go?
Exactly.
All our taxes, where does it go?
This idea that if you tax the rich, that all of a sudden all the problems will stop existing. That is so silly. You still have incompetent people that are distributing the money. They'll just create more jobs. There'll be more red tape.
And we get more in debt.
Yeah. What we got to do is figure out a real plan for...
So his answer to, and by the way, the position of AOC is not honestly represented by the guy who's here. He says that AOC has this new Green Deal that is a 70% tax rate on people who make over $10 million in a year, which is false on both counts. Totally separate from the GND. And B, her plan kicks in at $10 million a year. Now, I looked up, and Joe Rogan's response to that, I kind of had to skip through a little bit. He says, good luck, B word. Because he says he doesn't support that. He calls it stupid. Now, I don't know if Joe Rogan's really done any research on this. I Googled Joe Rogan's net worth to try to figure out what his net worth is. It says $25 million. Now, I believe only 16,000 people in the United States actually make over $10 million a year. I have a really hard time believing that Joe makes over $10 million in a year. Just think of how much of an insane amount of money that is. $10 million in a year. You have to make over $10 million for that number to even kick in. So to me, what it seems like is he's uneducated. He's kind of a bro, kind of a doofus. Not really in the nitty. It's not even. Should we even call that nitty gritty? It's just basics, understanding how marginal rate works. Just being educated on what's going on. It doesn't really seem like Joe is sort of in that sphere, if you will. But this is what it tells me. Okay, he says that he's down to raise his own taxes, but when it comes to the golden opportunity to defend that, which it's not even raising his own taxes, guys. That's what's hilarious about it. It's not even raising his own taxes. So he's arguing against a tax increase that wouldn't even affect him. So that tells me, really, you're going to support a tax increase on you? And Joe barely employs anybody as well. And he also doesn't understand that there's not a singular use for taxation, okay? Taxation is a tool for multiple things, okay? Money recirculation, as well as, you want to have like a certain burden of the funding of the government to be on the backs of certain groups of people, that is supposed to be the rich people because obviously they have more money, so they should be the ones paying at a higher rate, obviously. But, there's a lot of those things, and to just sort of dismiss social cohesion and wealth inequality, I think is pretty ridiculous. Money recirculation as well. You know, a poor person is much more likely, poor middle class, whatever. Anybody who's not rich is going to go out and spend their money on, you know, whatever they want to go buy, like food or, you know, buy a new game system that's out or get some clothes or something like that, you know, whatever, a car, whatever it's going to be, like actually use it, you know what I'm saying, use it on stuff. Whereas obviously, you know, there's not really much stimulant effect from rich people just kind of stashing their money, just putting it in banks. There's not really much stimulant going on there. So he doesn't really understand that either. But again, this is a lot of right-wing talking points that he's using with the whole bureaucracy stuff. And when it comes to creating jobs, like there are a lot of areas we could create jobs. Like I saw this video of like these people who were, I think they were volunteers, like cleaning junk and trash out of the water. And like imagine if we paid people, we hired people to do those kinds of jobs. So we need to create more jobs from the government. That's why I'm for, you know, the jobs guarantee that's proposed by Bernie Sanders. Very, very easy plan that I fully support. And so, you know, he says that he's down for the tax increase. The question I have is he really, though? Because a lot of these liberals, you know, and again, Joe Rogan's really a sort of mysterious guy, politically speaking. But and seriously, like, I couldn't help but laugh when he said, you know, taking long lunch breaks. Like, come on, dude. Like, it's just a meme. And I don't want to underscore the sort of problems there can be with bureaucracy and stuff like that, but there's also a sort of a lot of bureaucracy that comes with private insurance companies, for example. You know, a lot of the paperwork and administrative costs would disappear. The overhead costs are much lower. The overhead is much lower for things like Social Security and Medicare, as opposed to private insurance health companies, which means more of the money being paid actually goes to the healthcare. But, you know, yeah, I mean, bloatation in certain areas of the government is true. We need to reroute certain funds. But it also sounds like Joe's kind of, the areas he's saying are bloated seem to be the areas where they're really insignificant. Like, the thing he cites is, like, gender research or something like that, which is like, what are you even specifically referring to, and how much money would even be going to any of that stuff? We're talking about bloatation. We're looking at the foreign policy sphere is what we're looking at in terms of bloatation that we need to reroute. You know, rerouting our foreign policy budget over towards free college education would be really, really dope. You know what I'm saying? So he claims that, but when it comes to walking the walk and not just talking the talk, he doesn't seem to do that. So I want to know what your guys' thoughts are. I don't know. I mean, I am not a fan of him using the right-wing talking points, and I just simply don't know. I don't know where he lands politically, I would say, but I would say that I'm very concerned. I'm very concerned with his real authenticity towards the issue of whether or not he would really be down to give more of his money to the government if it were for the greater good and all that kind of stuff. And I'm also a bit worrisome and a bit worried that, you know, or not worried, but just weary of him not being, you know, supporting Bernie Sanders outright. But anyways, let me know your thoughts on this down below. Very curious to hear them.